Today, I'm going to show you how to edit over 100 images in Lightroom at once. Hello and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find me on Phlearn.com, where we make learning fun. In today's episode, we're going to show you how to bring in images from an entire photo shoot into Lightroom and help them to look their best. We're going to go through the settings used on import, and then we're going to edit one of our pictures to our standard baseline. We're going to apply that to the rest of the images in the series. We'll show you how to create your own custom brushes and how to apply them to multiple photos. Now, we're including a sample of these images as a download on Phlearn.com, so follow the link right down below so you can follow along. So here in Lightroom, my first step is to simply grab my folder that contains my images and click and drag that folder right into Lightroom. You'll see a little plus icon, and it's going to automatically bring up your import dialog. Now, in this case, my files are already on my computer. I brought them in from my memory card. All I'm going to do is add them to this catalog. Now, we're going to go to our file handling. Let's go ahead and choose our file handling. And here where it says build previews, I'm going to choose minimal. The reason is we're going to actually change these images. And if I build the standard size or one-to-one previews, those previews are going to have to be regenerated again. So at this point, we're just going to choose minimal previews. Down here where it says apply during import, I'm going to go to my metadata. We're going to click on new. I just want to include a little bit of information here. For instance, copyright, I want to make sure that I put my name in there, and I want to put copyright status as copyrighted. That's just a general good practice that makes sure your name is attached to your files. So you can fill out all this other information as well if you'd like, but make sure you at least fill out your copyright name and the fact that these images are copyrighted. All right, we'll go ahead and create that there. Develop settings, we're gonna have set to none. And keywords, we're gonna go ahead and add a couple. Now, this photo shoot was with my buddy, Niall Bratcher. He's just an awesome individual. He's a health coach and physical therapist. He's worked on me. If you're in pain and you wanna get out of pain, he's an awesome guy to go to. Anyway, so I'm gonna make sure to put his name in here. There we go, Niall Bratcher. And that's just gonna make sure when I'm moving forward that if I need to find these files, they're gonna be keyworded under Niall. Now, our next step here is just to click import, and this is simply going to, again, these files are already on this computer. It's gonna add them into this catalog, and that happens very quickly. We'll just show you this in real time. I'm pulling in 107 different photos. There we go, and you can see they've all pulled in real time right there. So Niall is a physical trainer, and we wanted to capture some images of him working on a client so he could use these for his social media and his website. So the goal here was, friendly interactions, show what he's actually working on, and to get some images where he stood out of the background. So now that we have all of our files in Lightroom, the first thing I'm gonna do is double click on my first image, and we're gonna go up here to the Develop tab. Now the Develop tab, this is where we can make some adjustments to our image. You can see at the top we have our histogram, and I have my shadow warning and my highlight warning turned on. You can see my highlights, we've just lost a little bit of information. So I'm gonna take my highlights and we're just gonna bring them down just a little bit, probably not even enough for you to perceive what's going on. Just a general good practice, bring your highlights down a little bit. I'm also gonna bring my shadows up a little bit. My overall goal for these photos, I just want them, to kind of like brighten up and feel like it's a nice open space. That's why we shot in natural light. So to bring that a little bit further, we have some plants in the background. So we're gonna bring our vibrance up. In this case, we'll do a +15 on the vibrance. We're gonna bring up a little bit of clarity as well, because we did shoot these at a very shallow depth of field. This is shot at 1.3. I wanna bring up clarity. That's gonna help enhance that detail and especially make my subjects look like they're more in focus. Next, I'm gonna go down to my detail slider, and we're gonna increase our sharpening just a little bit and bring up our radius as well. And again, the reason there is because we shot at a very shallow depth of field, and I wanna make sure that my subject is sharp. Next, we're gonna go right down here to our lens corrections. Let's open that up. I'm gonna remove chromatic aberration, and we're gonna enable the profile corrections. Now in this case, it's having trouble figuring out what's going on. So our lens, I'm just gonna make sure I go down here and choose Canon. There we go. And then it's going to know which lens that I'm using because I shot these with a Sony a7R III with a Metabones adapter and a Canon 85 1.2. So I can choose the Canon. This is, in fact, it's the 85 1.2. There we go. And it's going to adjust my image accordingly. At this point, these are my standard adjustments. So let's take a look at the before and the after. Here's our image when we imported it. There we go. And here's our image after some of our adjustments. Now, the great thing about Lightroom is that I've made changes to one of my images. I can apply these changes to the rest of my images, which will get rid of my vignetting and distortion, add a little bit of clarity, take my highlights down, bring my shadows up. All of these are baseline changes that are going to help the images look better. Let's go back to our library module. I'm still selected on my first image. I'm going to hit Control or Command A to select all. Now you'll notice when I hit select all that all of my other images are selected, but they're light gray as opposed to very light gray. So this image that's very light gray, this is our base image, and all these others are secondary, meaning it's going to take the settings from this base image that's lighter in color and apply it to all the other images in my series. All I have to do now is go to Sync Settings. And again, we're in our library module. So down here to Sync Settings, and I can choose what I'd like to be synced. In this case, I'm just going to hit Check All and hit Synchronize. It's going to take all of those settings and individually, you can kind of see it's applying them one by one here, just making some changes in the background. It's basically taking my images and bringing up the baseline, creating a proper exposure, adding sharpening, adding clarity, and enhancing our lens corrections. Now that we made those adjustments to all of our images, it's time to change our exposure on different groups of images. Let's hit Control or Command D to deselect, and I'm going to hit the plus key a couple times. Now, I recommend adjusting your exposure here in your library module. It's very quick to do. We're going to open up our Quick Develop panel. There we are. And I'm going to choose our images that we want to increase our exposure. So these look pretty good. Starting here, these images just look a little bit dark. That image looks a little bit dark. This image looks a little bit dark. And again, keep in mind, kind of my goal, there we go. My goal for this series was to create a bright feeling with these images. So let's select some that are just a little bit dark. And here in my Quick Develop module, I'm in my library module, so the Quick Develop panel, I can take my exposure and I can just simply make it brighter. Just click on this 1/3 stop. There we go. And it's going to apply that to all of those images in a series. And 2/3 of stop looks really good. So now we're going to continue to go down with the rest of the image and really anything that I feel like could use a little bit more brightness. And most of these images I am going to brighten up just a little bit. And the reason is I spoke with Niall before the photo shoot and we decided on the look and feel of the photographs. So I want to make sure that we did that during the photo shoot and enhance that in post-production. So moving down to these images here, I'm just kind of enhancing our exposure just a bit. Just bringing that up a little bit. There we are. And this is something that you can change at any time. I'm just kind of going through here and anything that looks a little bit dark, I'm just selecting. Now you can see in this case, I'm going to click on this image. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. So click on this image, hold Shift and go all the way to the bottom and then click right twice on my exposure. So it's just going to bring up my exposure on all of those images by 2/3 of a stop. Now, looking at these, I'm like, you know what? I think I overdid it. They're a little bright. I'll just click to the left one time. There we go. And it's going to bring them down by 1/3 of a stop. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with our baseline. We've got our exposure pretty well figured out for the majority of our images. Now it's time to go into each individual image and do some very quick corrections. And we're going to create a custom brush to do so. So let's go ahead and choose an image where I feel it's a little bit dark. Now, my suggestion here is instead of looking at this image full screen, just like it is, I actually recommend looking at it a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go down to 1/4 view or even 1/8 view. And this is just going to allow me to see my image as a whole. Now, looking at this image as a whole, I've got a little bit of a bright spot over here. We've got a bright spot over here. And this kind of area, even behind Niall, is just a little bit darker than the walls to the left and the right. we were shooting in natural light, so I wasn't hitting with a bunch of softboxes. So I want to bring that exposure up just a little bit as well. So to work on the middle part of the photo, I'm going to go to my develop module, and we're going to go to this adjustment brush. Now here in the adjustment brush, I want to bring up our shadows. There we are. And we're going to bring up our exposure just a little bit. I'm going to use the open bracket here to make my brush a little bit larger, and we're just going to paint right over here. Okay, now looking at this, I can still make adjustments, you can see, to what I just painted. And this is one of those cases where the exposure really didn't help out so much. So let's just bring that back down to like, there we go. Let's try 0.2. And we are gonna bring up our shadow levels just a little bit more. There we go. Maybe we'll go like 0.3. Okay, and I'm gonna paint this in this area as well. So as I go down to before I did any brush strokes, there's kind of the before and the after. And you can see, again, my goal is not to change skin tone or anything like that. It's just to kind of brighten up those shadows. So that's what we're working on, mostly on our shadow levels with a little bit of exposure. And I can add just a tiny bit of clarity to that area as well. So now I've created settings within this brush that I want to use over and over again. So my next step is to create a preset using this brush. Let's go right up here where it says Effect. I'm going to click on this Custom menu, and you can see right down here in the bottom, you can save these current settings as a new preset. All right, I'm just going to call this NB for Nile Bratcher Lighten. Let's hit Create there. So now we're in a really good spot, and I can stay in my Develop module. If I use my right and left arrows within my Develop module, I can switch between images. And because I created a custom brush, check it out. Even when I go to my new images, my Develop module is going to stay on my adjustment brush, and it's going to stay on NB Lighten. So there we go. This is the image we lightened up. I'm just going to hit the right arrow and paint right over this area. There we go. Let's see our before and the after with that. And again, I can just kind of continue to go through these images and lighten up those shadows. So again, I just want to make sure that Nile, and I'm not necessarily trying to have this only be visible on Nile's skin. Nile and the surrounding areas we're going to lighten up. And by doing that, it's going to draw more attention to my subject. We're going to get our other subject, Christina, in a minute too. There we go. And that looks pretty good. Now you can see in this case, I think I overdid it a little bit. So we'll just go back. Okay. Just click a couple times here. There we go, and bring some brightening between our subjects. So your eye tends to be drawn to lighter areas in the photos, and you tend to not look at darker areas. So it's important to lighten up the areas where your subjects are. That's just gonna help the viewer know what to look at. There we go. And you can see I'm going very quickly. This is all in real time. I'm talking at the exact same time I'm going through these photos. And again, I'm viewing these images at 1/8 size because at this point, I'm not concerned. I'm not trying to do any, skin retouching or anything that requires detail. I want to look at my images as a whole. See here, the background was way too dark, so I'm just brightening all that up. There we go. Get my background. See, it evens out the exposure and make sure we get our subject. So let's just check that out. There's the before. All this was a real dark area, including my subject. There we go. The after, we're lightening it up. Here again, we're kind of focusing on the center of the image. And there we go. We're looking really, really good. So I'm able to very quickly move through these images and locally apply adjustments to each individual photo. Now this process is very quick. We're just going to continue on with the rest of the images and speed it up to save a little bit of time. Well, there we go. We just finished up all of those images, and this makes a huge difference. Again, it just brings more attention to your subject. We're almost done. The last thing we want to do is go through and crop some of these photos, because I was just shooting it all handheld, and some are a little bit tilted, and some are including, for instance, like the door in the background. It's just kind of unsightly. We want to get rid of those things. So we're going to go through and quickly do a crop on our photos. So we're going to start here at the very top. Let's just go ahead and click on our first image, and I'm going to hit R for our crop tool. And then, for instance, this image is just a little bit tilted. So we're just going to click here on the outside and just straighten up, and we're going to hit enter. Now, again, you can do this in your develop module. I'm going to hit R for the crop tool, and we're just going to kind of go through our images one by one. Now, thankfully, I am shooting here with the Sony a7R III, which is like 42 megapixels. It's insane. So if I crop a little bit of information out, it's really not that big of a deal. So again, you can see we're just going through pretty quick. And in these cases, I'm just kind of straightening up these photos. That one doesn't need it. And we're just going to keep on moving until we see something that kind of like, calls attention. Now, in this case, we're including the door in the background, which really just doesn't add anything to the photo. It's kind of distracting. So I'm going to hit R for the crop tool. Let's hold down Shift, and we're going to click and drag in, and then I'm going to reframe just around what's actually important in this image. In this case, it's Niall and my subject. There we go. And we can click in there and see, you know what, at this point, I'm like, we need a little bit more room for Niall. He's just his head was a little bit too close to the top of the frame. So let's hit enter, and we're good to go. So I can continue to move in. In this case, we'll just do a rotation and a little bit of a crop. So let's go ahead and rotate that in. There we are, and we'll crop this in as well. So I'm focusing just on what's important in these images. There's no reason to include extra information, especially if it's just going to distract us from what we actually want to see in this photograph. In this case, we're good for the most part. It's just mostly that door that's kind of bothering us. So let's move in, for instance, here. You can see there's an exit sign in the door. So we're going to hit R for the crop tool, hold Shift and click and drag from the top right in. There we go. And in this case, this is my important part. I really don't need to see anything else. So we're just going to bring this right in here, using my rule of thirds, kind of keeping Niall right at this intersection and Christina at this other intersection. Hit enter, and we have a new crop for our photo. There we go. We'll hit G to go back to our grid view and continue to scroll down to see if there's anything else that we want to crop out. So in this case, you can see, again, we have our door here. We're just going to bring this in, click on the outside here and rotate it down. And then I'm just going to crop this in. We want to make sure we can see Christina's whole body, but Niall, we can cut him off at the knee, and that's totally okay. There we go. And we can see our image overall right here. And again, my suggestion is to do all of this work looking at your images zoomed out. That's how you get a feel for how the entire image looks without focusing on the little details. For these images, we have a little bit too much headroom, and we've included some extra information in there. I actually use a seamless background that's attached to the ceiling here, so you can see the seamless. So let's go ahead and crop down from the top. Don't need to include that little light there. And we'll crop up from the bottom and straighten out our image at the same time. There we are. Let's bring that in. And you can see, just with a change of crop, let's just undo that. There we go. So you can see we've included a lot of information up here and at the bottom that kind of doesn't really add to the story. With our crop, we've brought it in, and this is a lot more focused of an image. We got a couple more examples here on the bottom. We've got some really great photographs of Niall. So I'm going to hit R for the crop tool. And again, we're just going to bring this in. We don't need to include this extra information. And this may be relatively obvious to a visual person, like a photographer, right? I'm like, okay, we obviously don't need, let's just show the before. That's all the way to the before, by the way. This is our image straight out of camera, which didn't look bad. Here's where we're at now. It's a lot more focused, and we're looking at Niall. This, again, may be fairly obvious to a visual person. So delivering an image with, the door still in the frame, you're like, oh, well, they could crop that out if they wanted to. oftentimes people who are not in the visual industry or just in the mindset of thinking about that sort of thing, they won't see that. They'll just notice, I like this photo, it's not perfect, I don't know why. It might be obvious to you. So my suggestion is when you deliver your images to your clients, go ahead and clean them up, crop them out, get rid of anything that you don't need, make sure you change your exposure, just get them to this point. This is a great starting point to work with your clients. So now it's time to go ahead and hit this fit button here. We're gonna see what our image looks like. Again, this was shot at a great 42 megapixels. So even if I zoom in, let's just go to a 1:1 scale, you can still see we have tons of detail here in Nile. We'll just fit it. We can zoom back out. We've done quite a bit of work to this image. Again, let's just go back. Here's the before. You can see it's dark, especially here in the center, and we've included quite a bit of information on the right-hand side. Here is our after. There we go. And it's a much more pleasant, just bright and open image. Well, there we have it. We just edited over 100 images in just a couple of minutes. Now, we're including a sample of these images in a download, so you can follow the link right down below, download these images, and practice on your own. If you like this tutorial, give it a big thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button. We'll send you free tutorials every single week. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure to follow Niall as well, because he is an awesome guy. He's on Instagram at Niall Bratcher. Thanks again. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone.